My name is Pamela Curtin. I am a public historian and educator, and I'm the author of Go Discover Westmoreland, which is the first children's book talking about the history of Westmoreland County. Go Discover Westmoreland is a picture book that discusses the history of Westmoreland County. So it spans 250 plus years of history with stories from throughout the county. So we spanned all of the school districts and many different time periods, different historical places and events and historical figures. And so we wanted to try to capture all of the diverse stories that are in Westmoreland County within one book. So I started with identifying some of the main themes of Westmoreland County's history and really looking at key places, events, and people to help illustrate and tell that story. And so I gathered a lot of information, knowing that a lot of that would be pared down through the drafting process and through illustration. And so I really tried to focus on both the overarching story and what would be on each individual page or individual spread of the book. Part of the book goes chronologically, so we start with the very early history and then we move more into the 20th and 21st centuries. And then some of the other pages capture more of the broad thematic history. This book really involved a lot of historical research as well as outlining and drafting. And when you're doing historical research, you start with all of these different sources and you gather the sources that are relevant to your project, and then you craft those stories into your own words. And I started with writing knowing that through drafting, I would figure out ways to say things in fewer words or to be able to capture a lot of ideas within just a few sentences. So I was really excited by how both the text and the illustrations could both be used to tell the story and seeing how they could complement one another. They're both very different mediums, but they are both ways of telling a story. I really enjoy using children's literature for myself as an educator when I'm working with children, doing picture book read-alouds, and I felt like this was something that our community was missing, was a picture book that could help tell that story to students.
This is DJ Kaufman. I've been a professional cartoonist for over 25 years now. That's hard to believe. So in this project, it's basically the story set up as kind of a group of kids exploring the history of Westmoreland County by way of putting on a school play. While I've drawn children's books and comics before, I've never done something like this where it's the history based on local history. And I think some of the best history comes from right in our own backyard. Well, every project just starts with research. So there was a lot of research here, finding the reference photos for the time. I had to wait for Pam's script to kind of go through it and kind of start to learn myself. So that took a couple weeks of really diving deep into the history and kind of just getting in that zone of what I was about to draw. Well, like I said, I've been making comics and graphic novels for over 25 years now. But we have some really cool digital tools these days, and I like to be innovative and always kind of try to improve the process and speed it up. So first thing I do is I used a service, like I said, called Miro. That's basically a big magical whiteboard that allows you to log on and put everything in there from your script to your sketches, reference for the different time periods. And these days I actually draw 100% on my iPad Pro in a program called Procreate. But I basically still approach my work traditionally, meaning that I will pencil out the roughs on one layer and then I'll send that in for approval. I'll put it on the Miro board for approval, and then I'll ink and I'll color it in stages over different layers inside of that one document. And then I'm able to kind of just magically send it around through the internet. So when I was about 8 years old, I had this epiphany, like an awakening, that when I was looking at this G.I. Joe comic book, I realized that someone drew it. And I thought, I can draw that too. So ever since I was 8 years old, I wanted to draw comics and things like that. So anything that I ever put out there, I'm always hoping that maybe it just sparks one or two more artists out there, and that's kind of what keeps me going. Well, beyond the fact that it always feels good to put something on the rack and have a finished project, I was finding myself thinking that like I'm actually part of the history now just because I drew this book about the history, and who knows, hopefully it outlives me and that it's there for future generations to find and discover.
I'm Lisa Hayes, Executive Director of the Westmoreland Historical Society, and our 250 exhibit is called Westmoreland 250, telling our story with 25 objects. Well, we've chosen 25 objects from across the county that tell some aspect of our history. We're not trying to tell 250 years ago our history was. We're trying to talk about aspects of history over 250 years. Well, there's three main sections to the exhibit. So building a home, creating community. People had to get here, and then they had to find a place to live, and often it was with people that they knew or had something in common with. And then we talk about Westmoreland at work, and so much of our industry really helped to create America and is very typical of what was happening everywhere in the country. And then we have banding together, service and sacrifice is our third theme. And it's how the people in a community support each other, whether it's through churches or volunteering or the nurses, the military, of course. And then I also like that there's just some fun, funky things, like the Kecksburg incident, which is, created at a time or happened at a time when we were worried about Russia and maybe UFOs and aliens, and we were conscious of civil defense and things like that. I think that the piece that I've seen people react to most is maybe the gas pump, just because it's recent enough that we remember them, but it's still nostalgic. So I don't know that, it's typical. It's typical, so it's not unique. And that's kind of like we're telling our story, everybody's story here. So it's okay if it's typical. I'm most proud of the collaboration that this exemplifies. Joanna did a lot of work visiting organizations, and most of them were very receptive to what we were doing. And the ones that had questions, most of them we were able to answer, and they seemed excited to work on this significant exhibit and also to come here and see it on display. As far as anybody I've talked to, they're very happy with how their things have been used and shown. I hope this exhibit is up for a long time because it was a lot of work and it tells a very important story. It ties local county history to national history, so I think that's important. All of southwestern Pennsylvania was Westmoreland when it was formed in 1773. And over the years, different counties got split off from Westmoreland. But if you live anywhere in southwestern Pennsylvania, you owe your roots to Westmoreland County.